You are listening to Specifically for Seniors, a podcast designed for a vibrant and diverse senior community. I'm your host, Dr. Larry Barsh. Join me and a lineup of experts as we discuss a wide variety of topics that will empower, inform, entertain, and inspire as we celebrate the richness and wisdom of this incredible stage of life. The news that the Trump administration plans to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency offices and the future implications of Trump's energy policies on the environment and climate led to my concern about how will it affect my children and grandchildren and yours. I wondered if there was anything we can do. So I invited David Cain from the Citizens Climate Lobby to talk to us about the organization, what it does, and how he became active in the CCL. Welcome to Specifically for Seniors, David.
Well, thank you, Larry. I very much appreciated the opportunity to join you this afternoon. And I want to thank the audience, all of you that showed up. And we're going to be talking about a topic that can be controversial.
Let's start off by you telling us about your professional background and how you became a full-time climate change activist.
Sure. My story is about climate hope and possibility. And I want to share with you and hope you will become part of my story. I'm a grandfather with 5 grandchildren. I'm not an environmentalist nor a climate scientist. I'm just a fellow citizen. I'm an electrical engineer and former climate skeptic, and I became aware of its possibility back in the 1980s. My PhD is in communications theory, is used to detect weak signals obscured by noise, sort of like detecting emerging climate change in northern weather. I ran nuclear reactors for the US Navy and later worked in nuclear safety analysis. I was a part of an industry review team after the 3 Mile Island meltdown in 1979. This was a study of human unwillingness to accept a role in causing the unthinkable at the time. You can connect the dots to climate change today. Later, I co-founded a successful Silicon Valley company providing environmental management software to heavy industries worldwide. I had no skin in the game on the climate controversy, but I concluded on the weight of the evidence that human-caused climate change is the real deal. Hazard to my community, to my country, and the world. By 2014, I realized that I was making a good living off of the climate change issue, but I was not solving this climate change problem. So I retired and subsequently discovered and joined the Silicon Valley North chapter of CCL. CCL is the CCL is Citizens Climate Lobby. By the way, computer models in the 1980s predicted that we were beginning to see the effects of climate change by the first decade of the 21st century. And it arrived right on time. So, 2 years later, I'm a part of a lobby team at the Capitol. I'm sitting next to my member of Congress, where we were advocating an important piece of climate legislation. She was very reluctant. I was sitting right next to her when she said, "Yes, I will support you." I was totally blown away. Since we just moved the climate change solution needle just a little bit. And from that, I became a CCL lifer volunteer. By the way, if you've never done so, consider checking the box on the meeting with your elected officials being part of a citizen lobby team on any issue that matters to you. You'll never regret it.
Let's go back a little bit and explain what the Citizens Climate Change Lobby is.
Well, CCL is a nonprofit 501c3 education institution and a 501c4 lobbying organization. That's the legalese. One of our activities, yes, our mission is building the political will for a livable world. It's all about building relationships. What's political will? It's in, yeah, it's engaging the engine of democracy to drive durable and peaceful change. Last month's podcast featured Sam Daly Harris, who mentioned the Citizens Lobby, Climate Lobby in his Reclaiming Democracy. CCL is, first of all, a bottom-up, not a top-down organization. We are a climate organization, but not an environmental one. We're a civic organization, both at the local level and at national level. We're 99% volunteer, all ages, all walks of life, absolutely amazing people like all of you. Our values, what we believe in, are focus, optimism, diversity, relationships, integrity, being nonpartisan, and what I like the best, personal power. We believe that people of all political stripes are basically good. Lobby Day next June, and you're part of a group of 1,000 fellow citizens gathered on the steps of the Capitol, people of all ages, backgrounds, from every state. Our lobbying is very sophisticated. We track everything that representatives and senators do climate-wise. We have more than 200,000 members. We're organized in more than 350 chapters across the country and worldwide. We meet every month, and we have lots of activities in between. We're lumped together by something we call CCL community. It's really what's known as a Salesforce application, and I would love to get you on community to show you around. What impresses me about CCL is as a smart learning organization that's resilient and versatile. It's been the best organization I've ever been part of, professional or otherwise.
It's funny you mentioned Sam Daly Harris. We had him on a podcast just a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned your organization, and that's how I got in touch with you.
I've met Sam Daly Harris in Washington, D.C., and I have a signed autograph of his book, one of my favorites.
Um, so, what are CCL's climate solutions? What's the policy agenda?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, it's not about what you're against, it's all about what you're for. And just as a introduction, imagine later in that day in Washington, D.C., you're standing in the hallway with a Kentucky lobby team doing a recap after a meeting with Mitch McConnell's staff. It's amazing what we learn from these meetings. We have a confidential, trusted relationship with Congress. And what we hear is often very different when politicians are saying to the public, our climate solutions are deliberately bipartisan. They rely less on regulation and more on market mechanisms. We verify them using climate and economic models. Then we balance what's economically efficient with what is politically efficacious. And that's the secret sauce. Our specific climate policy agenda consists of 4 focus areas. The first of which is pricing carbon. As you know, when you burn fossil fuels, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Arthur Pigou is a British economist who mathematically proved over 100 years ago, when you have an external phenomenon like climate impacting our economic system, The most efficient way of managing it is putting a price on it, a carbon tax. Taxes are not very popular, but they are very effective. Think of what happens when we're trying to control inflation that we've been experiencing. The Fed raises the interest rate. It's a tax. It's a blunt but very effective instrument to deal with economically impactful things that are external, such as the COVID experience that we just went through. What I'm getting around to is this one of our main pillars of policy. Very efficient, but not very efficacious politically because people don't like taxes. The second policy area is healthy forests, the ultimate green solution, both in the wilderness and also urban forests. One of my favorite urban forests is just a few miles away, nestled next to a freeway. One of examples of that is the Fix Our Forest Act, which currently pending in Congress. It's really intended to deal with wildfires, which you've heard about in California, but you're also seeing now on the East Coast in the Carolinas and in Canada and everywhere. This is bipartisan. There are both Democrats and Republicans who are for this act. And we're hoping to pass it in the current Congress of all things, with your help. Healthy forest is the third. I'm sorry, the fourth is building efficiency and electrification. A couple of years ago, there was a omnibus piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act. It didn't have as much to do with inflation, but had a lot to do with, with clean energy and electrification, and things you can even do in your own home. The fourth policy agenda item and focus area is permitting reform. We just can't build things in our country anymore like we used to. Our national transmission system is old and worn out. It's antiquated. It's not ready for the 21st century. So the idea is to reduce bureaucratic red tape intelligently. And so with permitting reform, we have a bipartisan bill that almost passed in the last Congress called the Energy Permitting Reform Act, EPRA. Look for it. So far, we've been instrumental at CCL in passing legislation that could get us to about 50% of where we need to be in addressing climate change in our country by mid-century. But as you know, Larry, there's work in the current administration to claw all of that back. And so we at CCL are in a defensive mode to help protect the gains that have been achieve. So that's an overview of our policy agenda.
So now a listener has listened to uh, these solutions that are bipartisan in nature and wants to become involved. How does that happen?
Ah, many ways. I talked earlier about the personal power, personal power, and getting involved. But the personal power of a single individual is limited, as all you know. There's all kinds of organizations involved in climate. There are people involved in protests and activism on the streets, which calls attention to the problem. Or you can join an organization like CCL, which is focused on the solution. All good. It's really all good. We all kind of think of it as proceeding and progressing in parallel lanes. But I'll give you some examples of things that we do. One of my favorites is tabling. You might see people on the street in front of a farmer's market or out on Earth Day that's coming up. And one of the community things, tabling is a great way to meet and interact with people. We don't stand behind the table, we stand in front of it. And we strike up conversations with passersby. It really is a great way to find your climate voice, make mistakes, and learn how to connect and relate. And by the way, CCL does a lot of training on climate conversations. Another example that you see is a young volunteer at a fair where they're staffing a climate anxiety counseling booth. This is like a lemonade stand, 5 cents per consultation. And it's so much fun to work with, mentor young people who really get it. I'll return to this in a bit. Another is leading a church event on the spiritual imperative of climate action. We have a whole kaleidoscope of church organizations that we work with. Um, we also have film, movie nights, tree planting on trails, just all kinds of activities. I mentioned that CCL is a bottom-up organization, and the innovation and genius of my fellow volunteers continues to amaze me. We have so much fun together. It's all about building interpersonal relationships with fellow citizens and each other. Now, we also do a lot of training, and I mentioned that. Besides outside experts in conferences and our national calls, which we do monthly, we do core volunteer training. We call it the CCL Climate Change University. Self-paced, online, basic and advanced. You can track your progress. And this is all available on that CCL community that I mentioned. We also do interactive group training online. I do the training on grassroots outreach, like presenting and tabling. So much fun. But some other topics. We have formal training on how to communicate with conservatives. By the way, we just held our annual conservative conference in Washington, D.C. We train on climate science basics, multimedia, understanding Congress, engaging with communities, climate economics, storytelling, and effective communication. We do training at chapter meetings and training at lobbying events and training at conferences. Training is a mainstay, but it's also a prime opportunity for you and me for personal growth, and you can too. Larry?
Yeah, I want to ask you two very specific things that I found out at your website, citizensclimatelobby.org. It had several actions that people can take now directly from your website. Links to them I'm going to put in the show notes, but let's talk a little bit. You have a section where you suggest write Congress to protect NOAA.
Yeah.
I'll put the link to that in the
Yeah,
show notes for people who want to do something now while they're getting trained.
that's right. That's right. You can do it.
The other one was write Congress to defend IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, climate provisions of that. And again, I'll put the link in the show notes.
Right.
That's again, citizensclimatelobby.org.
Yes, thank you for that, Larry. Um,
Well, one more thing I want you to do for me is to tell people where your podcast and your monthly speakers are and how to get involved with those.
okay. Well, let me start with the first, and that is contacting your members of Congress. It takes about 2,000 citizens to flip a Congress member from someone that's agnostic or uh, not enthusiastic about taking climate action to a more positive point of view. And that starts by writing letters and making phone calls. Personal appeal. You don't have to be a climate expert. You don't have to be a member of CCL, but just express your concern about climate change and ask them to take action. Even better is to go down to your representative's office, meet the staff, and share your concerns individually or more importantly, with your family and friends. Now, one of the big advances in climate change is something you mentioned, Larry, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. It's particularly important because the Trump administration is busy clawing back funds that Congress already allocated. It's a big part of that 50% of progress that was on tap to meet our climate goals by 2050. So by meeting with Congress, but most specifically calling and writing them, you can make a difference. If you're a constituent of a member of Congress and you call them up You can just read from a script. It just takes a couple of minutes. They're going to be very polite, very receptive, and you'll be very glad you did it. It'll make your day, I guarantee it. CCL has tools. Yeah. With suggested script. Yeah.
I was just asking if those scripts are available on these links that I'm providing.
Yes, they should be. And if you put your zip code, it sets you up to have ability to write or say as scripts for each representative and senator. Just takes a few minutes.
Okay, CCL has a climate change. CCL has a climate change podcast, and it presents monthly speakers. I know people can listen to the podcast if you tell us how and where it's available, but can we also hear the monthly speakers if we're not members?
Um, yes, the podcast is available, um, and I provided a link where that podcast. It's all publicly. In fact, most of CCL conferences and the podcasts are available on Community, but also you can find them on Google, YouTube.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called CCL Climate Radio. Now, I might have that wrong. I'll need to check on it. Climate Radio.
And the monthly speakers are available through the website?
They're available through the website, and we also have a YouTube channel with all the speakers going back for years. So if you Google and you go to YouTube and you put Citizens Climate Lobby in, you'll be able to find all those videos.
Okay. Anything we missed that
Yeah.
you'd like to talk about?
Well, I want to say that I really enjoy this. I have a couple of things. One is um, because you're senior citizens and we're senior citizens, you have a special gift, both to mentor young people and also be a volunteer. You bring a certain amount of earned wisdom that we all share. You may have read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's reflective contemplation, slow, critical thinking and judgment over our lifetimes. Something you all have in spades. Just talking about climate with everybody at every opportunity is something we need. And you can break the climate science because of the controversial nature of climate by just talking about it. The third thing that you can do is invest in the future. There's all kinds of 21st century clean energy technologies ranging from electric vehicles, rooftop solar panels, right up here above my ceiling of my rooftop solar panels. I don't pay anything for electricity, haven't for 10 years. heat pumps, induction cooktops, battery lawnmowers, you name it. It's what in Silicon Valley we call clean tech. There's a book by Paul Hawken called Drawdown. It's extensive encyclopedia of things large and small that you can do to reduce your emissions. So my final takeaway, if I may, there's a climate solution within our grasp if we reach for it. There would be a place for everyone, affording lifestyles that are safer, healthier, prosperous, with an abundance of affordable clean energy that will keep us energy independent. The transition would be graceful. Whether or not you believe in climate change, we would all be in a better place. So, what's the difference between wishing for a better climate future and hoping? Hope comes with agency and action. Your climate agency, your climate action, you. So, Larry, I want to thank you and thank you all for this opportunity.
David, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. I just hope we all can do something to get a solution of governmental activity that isn't in the negative direction.
Yes.
Thanks again for coming on specifically for seniors, David.
Absolutely my pleasure.
If you found this podcast interesting, fun, or helpful, tell your friends and family, and click on the follow or subscribe button. We'll let you know when new episodes are available. You've been listening to Specifically for Seniors. We'll talk more next time. Stay connected.